Behind Hollywood's golden glow lurked a darker truth, one soaked in booze and scandal. Many iconic stars fought private battles with alcohol, some hiding it behind studio-crafted illusions, others letting it derail their careers. While a few stayed afloat, many spiraled into chaos, wrecking both their legacies and lives. Some even turned film sets into their personal bars, stumbling through scenes in a drunken haze. Here are the Hollywood icons whose struggles with alcohol became legend. Sinatra's liquid legacy. Frank Sinatra wasn't just one of the most iconic singers of his generation. He was also infamous for his wild love affair with alcohol. And when it came to his drink of choice, there was no debate. Jack Daniels, anytime, anywhere. But Sinatra wasn't just a casual sipper. He was painfully specific about how his drink should be made. 4 ice cubes, 2 fingers of Jack, and a splash of water in a classic rocks glass. Sources even claim he downed a full bottle of Jack Daniels daily, much to the sheer horror of his doctor. Sinatra's life was a spectacle both on and off the screen, but when he was drunk, things could get unpredictable. His temper could shift in an instant. Sources revealed that he clashed with journalists and cast members, and at one point, his ex-wife even locked herself in a room after witnessing him drink gin, which reportedly signaled an aggressive shift in his demeanor. If you're wondering how deep his drinking problem ran, let's just say that he and his close Hollywood friends jokingly called themselves the American Olympic Drinking Squad, because apparently excessive drinking was a competitive sport. Sinatra passed away in 1998 at the age of 82, leaving behind a legacy that was forever intertwined with his love of booze. And in a final tribute to his lifelong obsession, he was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels in his casket, a fitting farewell to the man who made whiskey as much a part of his brand as his music. Burton's Vodka Marathon. Richard Burton didn't just drink, he mastered the art of intoxication. At the height of his boozing in the 1970s, the man reportedly downed 2 to 3 bottles of vodka a day. That's not just drinking, that's an Olympic-level commitment. And he didn't bother hiding it. Unlike his Golden Age peers who carefully guarded their reputations, Burton indulged openly, shamelessly assuring directors he'd cut back to just 1 bottle of vodka per day. Even more astonishing, he once claimed that drinking 2 bottles still counted as being sober, a statement that defies all logic and probably liver function. Yet, despite his personal demons, Burton was a force on screen. His 1966 performance in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf earned him an Oscar nomination, proving that even drowning in vodka, he could still outshine his peers. But his drinking wasn't without consequences. On the set of The Klansman, things got so bad that he had to film multiple scenes sitting or lying down because standing upright was apparently no longer an option. Eventually, after wrapping filming and enduring a tumultuous divorce from Elizabeth Taylor, Burton checked himself into a recovery center, attempting to reclaim his health. But the years of hard drinking had already done their damage. The toll on his body was irreversible, and in 1984, Richard Burton passed away from liver cirrhosis and renal failure. A tragic ending to one of Hollywood's most magnetic stars, proving that even legends aren't invincible to the bottle. Crawford's Pepsi Perks. Joan Crawford wasn't just a Hollywood legend, she was Pepsi's most glamorous power player. After marrying the CEO of PepsiCo, she was named the company's official ambassador, using her star power to push the brand. But let's be honest, the real perks had little to do with soda. As she embarked on global tours, she had one very specific demand, a booze lineup fit for a queen. At every stop, Crawford's beverage requests were nothing short of extravagant. 2/5 of Schlitz, 1/5 of Old Forester bourbon, 1/5 of Scotch, 1/5 of Beefeater gin, 2 bottles of champagne, and, because, well, branding, a case of Pepsi. But let's be real. That Pepsi was probably just there for show. The real headliner? Her alcohol of choice, which she indulged in far more than the soda she was supposed to promote. Joan Crawford may have been the face of Pepsi, but behind closed doors, her loyalty was to something a little stronger. Nimoy's hidden struggle. Leonard Nimoy was Mr. Spock to the world, but behind the stoic Vulcan facade, he fought a very human battle with alcohol. During the grueling production of Star Trek, Nimoy turned to drinking to cope with the long hours and relentless pressure. Even he admitted that alcohol became his crutch, while co-star William Shatner noted that Nimoy used it as a shield against the crushing weight of fame. What started as a casual drink spiraled into a full-blown addiction, fueled by his tendency toward obsessive behaviors. After wrapping Star Trek, Nimoy sought help and entered rehab, determined to break free from his dependence. But recovery wasn't a straight path. While he eventually conquered his drinking, he replaced one addiction with another, smoking. And tragically, it was this habit that would ultimately claim his life. Nimoy passed away at 83, leaving behind an immortal legacy as Spock. But his personal battles remain a stark reminder that even those who seem strongest on screen may be fighting unseen wars. Taylor's battle and redemption. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just a Hollywood icon, she was a force of nature. With her violet eyes and unmatched talent, she captivated audiences for decades. But behind the glamour, she fought a private war with addiction. For years, Taylor struggled with alcohol and opioid dependency, a battle that nearly consumed her. Then, in 1983, she made headlines, not for another blockbuster role, but for being the first major celebrity to check into the Betty Ford Center. Founded by First Lady Betty Ford, the center was created to help those battling addiction, inspired by Ford's own recovery journey. Taylor's decision to publicly seek treatment shattered the stigma surrounding addiction, proving that even Hollywood royalty wasn't immune. Her courage to admit her struggles gave countless others the strength to face their own demons. But Taylor's story didn't end with recovery. It transformed into a mission. Free from addiction, she channeled her energy into activism, becoming one of the most powerful voices for AIDS awareness and research. She used her star power to raise millions for treatment initiatives, ensuring that those suffering in silence had hope. From addiction to advocacy, Elizabeth Taylor's journey was one of resilience, proving that even in the darkest moments, there's a path to redemption. Grant's psychedelic recovery. Cary Grant was the epitome of Hollywood charm and sophistication, but behind that effortless grace, he battled a private war with alcohol. In the 1950s, desperate to regain control, he sought therapy. But his road to recovery took an unexpected, mind-altering turn. Instead of traditional methods, his doctor prescribed something radical, LSD. Grant didn't just try it. He fully embraced it. He believed the psychedelic experience offered clarity, enlightenment, and a new outlook on life. He even introduced it to others, including Judy Balaban, daughter of Paramount's president, who famously said, "If it was good enough for Cary Grant, it was good enough for me." Over time, Grant underwent an estimated 100 LSD therapy sessions, convinced that these surreal journeys were reshaping his mind for the better. Unorthodox as it was, Grant's treatment seemed to work. He left his struggles behind and lived a peaceful, fulfilled life until his passing at 82. While Hollywood remembers him for his suave screen presence, his legacy also includes a bold, unconventional path to self-discovery, proving that sometimes the road to recovery is anything but ordinary. Reed's wild end. Oliver Reed had a commanding presence on screen, captivating audiences with his portrayals of infamous villains. But beyond his acting prowess, he was just as famous for his piercing blue eyes, bar brawls, and an insatiable thirst for alcohol. One of his most defining features, a facial scar, was the result of a drunken fight that left him needing 63 stitches. While many assumed it would end his career, Reed refused to be sidelined. Instead, he embraced his rebellious persona, continuing to star in over 120 films, including the Three Musketeers trilogy, Oliver Twist, Treasure Island, and Gladiator. Despite his rock star-like reputation, Reed remained one of Hollywood's most sought-after actors. When Ridley Scott personally cast him as Proximo in Gladiator, there was only one condition: he had to stay sober during filming. But Reed's off-screen antics never truly stopped. On one fateful night in Malta, before finishing his work on Gladiator, he entered a drinking competition with Royal Navy men at a local tavern. That night, Reed reportedly downed 8 bottles of beer, 3 bottles of rum, and several shots of whiskey. Not long after, he suffered a fatal heart attack, bringing his larger-than-life story to an abrupt end. But perhaps the most unbelievable part of his legacy is his own reflection on it. When asked about his one regret in life, Reed didn't mention his career, fights, or personal struggles. Instead, he famously admitted not having emptied every pub's beverages and not having slept with every woman in the world. A wild, unapologetic ending for a man who truly lived without limits. Landon's hidden struggle. Michael Landon was America's beloved TV father, the wholesome, steadfast presence in Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie. But behind the flawless, family-friendly facade, he was battling demons of his own, a deep addiction to alcohol, painkillers, and an astonishing cigarette habit that would ultimately cut his life short. While those around him suspected his drinking, few realized the extent of his secret consumption. On set, Landon ingeniously disguised his addiction, mixing whiskey into his coffee and vodka into other beverages, seamlessly blending booze into his daily routine. Even after filming wrapped, he headed straight to the neighborhood pub, drinking as if there were no tomorrow. Melissa Gilbert, who played his on-screen daughter, later admitted that as a child, she never noticed his hidden vodka sipping, but in hindsight, she reflected, "I'm sure he's one reason why I almost always picked men who smelled like alcohol." Yet, alcohol wasn't the only culprit. Landon Chain smoked 4 packs of unfiltered cigarettes a day, a habit that almost certainly contributed to the pancreatic cancer that took his life at just 54 years old. His on-screen legacy remains untarnished, but his personal struggles paint a darker reality behind Hollywood's most cherished father figure. Martin's perfect illusion. Dean Martin was the epitome of cool, a smooth-talking crooner whose effortless charm made him Hollywood's ultimate gentleman drinker. With a glass in one hand and a cigarette in the other, he built an entire persona around the idea of being a carefree, happy-go-lucky drinker. He even famously quipped, "I feel sorry for people who don't drink because when they wake up in the morning, that's as good as they're going to feel all day." But here's the twist. It was all an act. According to his daughter and close friends, Martin was never the heavy drinker people assumed. More often than not, the whiskey glass in his hand contained nothing but apple juice, while the world around him bought into the illusion. Simply holding a drink and a smoke elevated his legendary status, making men want to be him and women want to be with him. Yet behind the showbiz persona, Martin was a devoted family man. Unlike his Rat Pack contemporaries, he always made it home for dinner, rarely indulging beyond one drink with his wife each evening. While his career was synonymous with booze, Martin walked a fine line between image and reality, knowing exactly when to rein it in. He passed away in 1995 at the age of 78, leaving behind a legacy of effortless charisma, proving that sometimes the greatest performances happen off stage. Peyton's tragic spiral. Barbara Payton was once a rising star in the 1950s, a B-list actress with A-list connections. She shared the screen with legends like James Cagney, Gary Cooper, and Gregory Peck, while also making headlines for her relationships with Hollywood's elite, including Bob Hope and her husband, Franchot Tone. But as quickly as she rose, she fell even faster, consumed by alcohol addiction and self-destruction. Her drinking didn't just ruin her career, it stripped away her beauty, her livelihood, and her dignity. Public drunkenness led to multiple run-ins with the law, and as desperation set in, she began writing bad checks and even resorted to prostitution. Peyton's personal life was just as chaotic, marked by violent relationships, reckless affairs, and endless scandals. By the 1960s, her alcoholism had reached a breaking point, turning her once glamorous existence into a sad, lonely struggle for survival. The downward spiral was relentless. She lost custody of her child, was found sleeping in a Sunset Boulevard bus station wearing only a coat and bathing suit, and was arrested multiple times for public intoxication and disorderly conduct. In the end, her life became a tragic blur of bars, arrests, and regret. Peyton's once promising career ended in heart and liver failure at just 39 years old, a devastating reminder of how fame, when mixed with addiction, can vanish in an instant. Barrymore's tragic reflection. John Barrymore was Hollywood royalty, a member of the legendary Barrymore acting dynasty and one of the finest performers of his time. But for all his brilliance on stage and screen, he was fighting a battle he knew all too well: alcoholism. Ironically, many of his most celebrated roles involved playing troubled characters struggling with alcohol, perhaps because his own demons made the performances eerily authentic. Famed for his riveting Shakespearean portrayals and his chilling performance as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Barrymore's career was built on raw talent and emotional depth. But as his years passed, his drinking spiraled out of control. The addiction was so severe that his second wife once caught him trying to drink her perfume, a desperate act that revealed just how far gone he was. In 1933, he starred in Dinner at 8, a classic George Cukor comedy where he portrayed a washed-up alcoholic actor, a role that hit far too close to home. As the years went on, Barrymore's declining memory forced him to rely on cue cards, a tragic marker of his once brilliant mind fading under the weight of alcohol. His career collapsed, and in the end, his body couldn't keep up with his habits. At just 60 years old, Barrymore succumbed to alcohol-related illnesses, leaving behind a legacy of both brilliance and tragedy, a Shakespearean fall in its own right. O'Toole's liquid courage. Peter O'Toole wasn't just a cinematic legend. He was also one of Hollywood's most notorious drinkers. With his dazzling blue eyes and effortless charisma, he seemed every bit the leading man. But behind the scenes, he was fueling his performances with alcohol. In a candid interview with David Letterman, O'Toole openly admitted that booze was simply a part of his generation's culture, an unspoken rule that drinking was just as important as showing up to work. One of the most infamous examples of his drinking on set happened during the filming of Lawrence of Arabia. The now iconic camel raid scene should have been a moment of high drama, but there was just one problem. Both O'Toole and co-star Omar Sharif were terrified of camels. Their solution? Get drunk and hope for the best. This decision, often described as liquid courage, helped them power through, though O'Toole later admitted that he barely remembered filming the scene at all. At least he didn't forget his lines, a small victory in a career where his talent somehow thrived despite the booze. O'Toole's drinking habits became as legendary as his performances, proving that sometimes Hollywood's greatest stars shine even through a haze of alcohol. Shaw's Scotch-fueled chaos. If you thought the sharks were the biggest problem on Jaws, think again. The real tension came from Robert Shaw, specifically Robert Shaw and his Scotch. The 1975 blockbuster was already a logistical nightmare, with uncooperative mechanical sharks, rough seas, and clashing egos. But Shaw took things to another level, fueling the on-set chaos with a steady stream of booze. His drunken antics were especially problematic for his co-star Richard Dreyfuss, who quickly grew tired of Shaw's perpetual inebriation. Their off-screen tension became legendary, with Shaw constantly pushing Dreyfuss's patience to the limit. At one point, Dreyfuss snapped, grabbing a glass of scotch from Shaw's hand and hurling it into the ocean, a move many probably wished they had done on day one. Ironically, there was one scene where Shaw's drunkenness actually worked in his favor, the moment when his character Quint appears completely wasted. Safe to say, that was probably the easiest take of the entire shoot. Vincent's fall from grace. Jan Michael Vincent was Hollywood's golden boy, the epitome of charm and rugged good looks, best known for his role in Airwolf. His rise to fame was almost like a fairy tale. While serving in the California Army National Guard, he was discovered by a film scout, catapulting him into the world of movies and TV. He quickly worked alongside Hollywood greats like Robert Conrad, Rock Hudson, Charles Bronson, John Wayne, Burt Reynolds, and Robert Mitchum. But what should have been a legendary career took a tragic turn. After securing one of the highest paychecks in TV history for Airwolf, Vincent's wealth became his downfall. The newfound fortune fueled his dangerous addictions to alcohol and cocaine, and by the second and third seasons, his substance abuse became impossible to hide. His erratic behavior delayed production, caused financial overruns, and ultimately led to the show's sudden cancellation. His drinking spiraled out of control, resulting in multiple arrests for drunk driving. But the worst was yet to come. Vincent survived a horrific car crash, leaving him with a broken back and, eventually, the loss of a leg. His once flawless, chiseled features deteriorated, his face bearing the scars of addiction and time. As if that weren't enough, reports of domestic violence against his girlfriend only added to his downfall. What started as a Hollywood dream ended in a cautionary tale, proving that fame and fortune mean nothing when addiction takes hold. Flynn's life of excess. Errol Flynn was the ultimate swashbuckler, a Hollywood legend whose roles in Robin Hood and Captain Blood cemented his image as the embodiment of charm, danger, and adventure. But behind the dashing smile and devil-may-care attitude, Flynn lived a life of pure decadence, indulging in booze, women, and cocaine-fueled mayhem. He wasn't just a ladies' man. He was Hollywood's wildest playboy, drinking with Fidel Castro in Cuba and hosting debaucherous parties at his Malibu bachelor pad, which he shared with actor David Niven. His drinking wasn't just excessive, it was legendary. So much so that he earned the nickname Cirrhosis by the Sea, a grim joke referencing the sheer amount of alcohol he consumed aboard his private boat. But the party never stopped. Flynn's devotion to excess meant stumbling onto film sets completely inebriated, yet somehow still delivering performances that captivated audiences. His reckless lifestyle became his brand, but it also became his downfall. In his early 30s, Flynn collapsed in an elevator, only to be told by doctors that his heart and lungs were already irreparably damaged. But he refused to slow down. The wild parties, the booze, the excess, it all caught up with him. At just 50 years old, Flynn died of a heart attack, a tragic yet almost predictable end to a life that burned brilliantly, but far too fast. Bogart's boozy alter ego. Humphrey Bogart was Hollywood royalty, revered as the greatest male actor in American cinema history. His Academy Award nominations and legendary performances in classics like Casablanca cemented his status, earning him respect among his peers. But beyond the silver screen, Bogart was just as famous for something else: his relentless drinking habit. According to his friends, he was a charming man until 11:30 p.m. That's when the booze took over, and Bogart morphed into an entirely different person. furious, stubborn, sometimes even harsh and violent. His drinking bled into his professional life, often showing up to set inebriated or horribly hungover. One day, he even arrived in his pajamas, refusing to work and instead riding a bicycle around Warner Brothers studios. While filming Sahara, he wouldn't leave his dressing room until his wife Mayo Methot delivered a thermos full of martinis, a daily ritual that ensured he was properly prepared for the day. Bogart's drunken escapades were Hollywood legend. He once stole a restaurant safe and abandoned it on Beverly Hills Boulevard, and in another bizarre incident, he was taken to court for punching two women, all because they tried to grab his toy panda, which he had brought to an elite club as a drinking companion. Despite boozing with icons like Richard Burton and Frank Sinatra, even he pushed the limits too far, eventually getting banned from bars, taverns, and clubs. His lifelong devotion to alcohol and chain smoking took a toll. In 1956, he was diagnosed with cancer, and though his health rapidly declined, he was still seen enjoying a glass of sherry in his final days. A screen legend, a drinker, and a man who lived by his own rules, Bogart's story is as cinematic as the films he starred in. Fields' gin-soaked genius. You see, Fields wasn't just a brilliant comedian. He was a walking contradiction, seamlessly blending his real-life grumpiness, sharp wit, and love for booze into his on-screen persona. With his distinctive nasal voice and razor-sharp timing, Fields dominated American comedy, proving that his cynical, hard-drinking characters weren't just an act. They were a reflection of himself. Despite rising to fame in his mid-50s, Fields nearly drank himself into an early grave. His alcohol intake was legendary, with reports claiming he consumed over 2 quarts of gin per day. The result? Serious health issues, including delirium tremens, which nearly ended his career. He barely made it through films like Poppy, 1936, and The Big Broadcast, 1938, and eventually Paramount cut ties with him, unwilling to gamble on an actor whose drinking was becoming impossible to manage. Yet Fields wasn't finished just yet. In 1937, he found a lifeline in radio, becoming a regular on the Chase and Sanborn Hour. Unlike film, radio broadcasting was low effort and high reward, allowing him to recover his health while maintaining his celebrity status. But time wasn't on his side. In his final years, he was confined to the Las Encinas Sanatorium in Pasadena, where his body continued to deteriorate from decades of alcohol abuse. Then, on Christmas Day 1946, a holiday he famously claimed to loathe, Fields suffered a massive gastrointestinal hemorrhage and died at 66 years old. A comic genius, a relentless drinker, and a man who never took life too seriously, W.C. Fields left behind a legacy of laughter and a cautionary tale about the cost of excess. Lee's secret struggle. Bernard Lee was a stalwart of British cinema, boasting over 100 film and television roles in a career spanning half a century. His most iconic role? M, the no-nonsense head of MI6 and 11 James Bond films. But while he commanded authority on screen, his personal life was riddled with tragedy, a devastating string of events that would push him into the grip of alcoholism. It started with an unimaginable loss, the tragic death of his wife in a house fire, followed by a horrific mugging and financial struggles that left him in a deep depression. The weight of these tragedies drove him to drink, and it didn't take long for his addiction to spiral. During the filming of the Edgar Wallace television series, producers literally locked him in his dressing room to keep him from alcohol. But Lee wasn't one to be outmaneuvered. He allegedly hired someone to feed a straw through the keyhole so he could sip booze in secret. His reputation as a formidable drinker even intimidated fellow Hollywood heavyweights. The legendary Richard Burton, no stranger to a bottle himself, once admitted he couldn't keep up with Lee's drinking. But the years of excess took their toll. At 73, Lee succumbed to stomach cancer, a likely consequence of his relentless alcohol consumption. His legacy as Bond's trusted superior remains intact, but behind the scenes, he was a man haunted by loss, seeking solace in a bottle, a tragic reminder that even the most composed figures can be fighting unseen battles. Russell's silent tragedy. Gail Russell never dreamed of fame, but with her jaw-dropping beauty, it was inevitable. A shy and introverted girl, she preferred solitude over stardom, yet Hollywood came knocking when a Paramount executive noticed her striking looks. With her mother's insistence, Russell reluctantly stepped into the limelight, beginning a career that would bring both success and sorrow. In 1949, she married actor Guy Madison, though rumors swirled about a romantic entanglement with co-star John Wayne. But behind the glamorous facade, her personal life was unraveling. The marriage with Madison was turbulent, ending in divorce in 1954, and with it, her drinking spiraled out of control. By 1952, Russell's career had stalled, and her drunken arrests made more headlines than her films. Things worsened when Wayne's divorce case dragged her name into the scandal, pushing her further into alcohol dependency. Desperate to regain control, she sought treatment in a Seattle sanitarium and even made a brief comeback in 1955, starring in 7 Men from Now, a film produced by John Wayne. But her battle with alcohol never truly ended. Then, in a tragic final chapter, Russell was found dead in her Los Angeles home. The cause? Acute and chronic alcoholism, a devastating fate for an actress who never wanted fame, but couldn't escape its consequences. Tracy's endless battle. If you ever flip through Spencer Tracy's biography, there's one word you'll find on every page: alcohol. His legendary Hollywood career was shadowed by a lifelong war with booze, a battle so infamous that author James Curtis couldn't avoid mentioning it countless times in his biography. Tracy's drinking habits followed a strict, destructive pattern. According to Johns Hopkins medical records from 1942, Tracy would embark on alcoholic retreats after every film, disappearing for a week or 10 days to drink himself into oblivion. These binge cycles happened every 8 months, despite him knowing full well the damage it caused. His solution? Self-imposed isolation in luxurious hotels, cutting off the world while his drinking frustrated everyone around him. But what made his struggle even more tragic was the guilt that followed. Tracy's deep remorse over his drinking only fueled his self-destructive tendencies, leaving him drowning in shame. Even after 5 years of sobriety, he confessed that just seeing a martini triggered intense cravings. His close friend, director Joseph Mankiewicz, once noted that Tracy's shame wasn't just a byproduct of his drinking, it was the driving force behind it. His career remained brilliant, but behind the camera, his life was marked by regret, self-loathing, and scars that never truly healed.